just to answer that question, if I had to sum it up, we have two types of emotions. One emotion that comes directly from the heart, and one emotion that is triggered by the mind. The emotion that comes directly from the heart is not an emotion that I want to embrace. It's an emotion that might happen naturally, that maybe I have no control over initially, but it's an emotion that I must take control over as soon as it springs, right? Because again, if it only comes from the heart, first of all, it's not necessarily a clear emotion. The heart is a confused place, it's a wild place, and also it's not necessarily a good emotion. The mind can decide whether it's good or whether it's bad. So therefore, the ultimate emotion is the emotion that comes from the mind, that is triggered by the mind. When I contemplate on something, and my heart then is aroused by the mind, then that's the ultimate emotion. Of course, that is if the mind is contemplating on something good, on something divine. If I want to arouse my love for God, as he's speaking about here in the Tanya, and I contemplate on the creation of God, on Camelback Mountain, on Pinnacle Peak Mountain, whatever it is, on the nature around me, on the birds flying on top of me, that will lead me to an emotion of love that came from the mind. And that emotion not only is clearer, not only will it last longer, but it will also be an emotion that is fundamentally good, because it's the thought that produced it is fundamentally good. So those are the two emotions. Now it's true also on another level, maybe on a more simple level. Let's just speak about those two emotions, the heart versus the emotions that are created just from the heart, and the emotions that are created from the mind. You can look at it from a different standpoint. I think we've mentioned the 3 stages of emotions, right? There are 3 stages to every emotion. The stage number 1 is the stage of the heart, but it's a very dangerous stage because we don't know where it will lead. The heart is like fire, it can explode. So to give you an example, just a practical example, anger, for example, right? We've spoken about this maybe, but anger is a natural emotion. It's a human emotion. If something upsets me, I become angry. Everyone feels that. And it's not something I can necessarily control. The emotion itself I can control, but I can't be void of anger. Dead people are void of emotions and void of anger too. If you're alive, you have emotion. And anger is one of them. It's not something I can totally uproot. It's a natural emotion, like many other natural emotions. But that emotion comes from the heart. And therefore, for it to not become destructive, I have to take control over it immediately with the mind. And I have to dissect that emotion. If I feel angry and upset, I'll say, well, 1 second. First of all, is it justified? Secondly, maybe I'm looking at it from a different perspective. Maybe what upset me is really wasn't intended to upset me. Just the person who upset me maybe didn't mean it. Or you can look at it from many other thousands of perspectives. And then hopefully your mind will also come to teach you that there is no room for anger. That maybe you should accept what just happened as divine sent, as something that is meant for you to embrace. Maybe something that is part of your mission. Almost like what the Tanya says elsewhere, that if someone becomes angry, he's equated, in the words of the Talmud, and the Tanya then explains these words, but he's equated to someone who worships idols. Why? And the Tanya explains that is because someone who worships idols rejects God, and therefore he worships idols. So too, someone who becomes angry rejects God, because if he really believed that this was God sent, that if he really believed in God, then he would believe that everything is sent by God, including that which just upset him. And therefore, he wouldn't become angry. The fact that you become angry means that you're rejecting what God sent you, and therefore rejecting God, just like an idol worshiper. So that's where the mind has to come into play. That initial spark of emotion comes from the heart, yes. That's the human condition. But the mind has to come and control it. And that's why we focus so much here on the mind. if the mind doesn't control it, so going back to anger, and we can play this game with any other emotion, then you'll see that the emotion can become very, very dangerous, because that's what the heart is. It's a wild place. Therefore, we need the mind to control it. So in anger, there are 3 stages to anger. There's that initial spark, like we said. Stage number 2, I would say, is rage. Then someone loses control over everything, and he just flies into a rage. And the third and even worse emotion that comes purely again from the heart, because the mind has no room here in the picture, is resentment. I'm angry, I'm enraged, and then I keep a grudge. And that's as toxic as it gets. Now, why did all this happen? Why did that emotion fly into rage and fly into resentment? Because the mind took a back seat, or it wasn't part of the picture at all. And again, therefore there's so much emphasis here on the mind. Maybe, as we said, we can't uproot. Dead people don't have emotions. Fine, we're alive, and therefore we have emotions. But the mind has to really be the one in the driver's seat 24/7, so that again it can make the heart a place in which emotions become healthy, and a place in which emotions also drive us to do good. So that's the big idea here, and really that's what the focus is on. So thank you for that question, Margot.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, just to tie it back, and then we'll continue with the text itself here on page 239, but just to tie it back to the subject we came from, to speak about how the mind needs to control the heart, and how emotions need to be triggered by the mind and channeled through the mind, and then directed in an effective way by the mind. But that is because we spoke about the emotion of love. If you recall, right? There were 2 types of love that we spoke about: love like the flaming coals, and love of delights. Like the flaming coals is a love that comes from separateness, in which I feel separated from God, yet I know that there's a yearning for God within me, and I still love God. And hopefully I can do something with that love. It leads me to real connection. But then there's the love of delights, or loving delights, ahava b'tanugim in Hebrew, in which I am one with God. It's a love that comes from oneness. It's not that I need anything from God. I don't need to quench my thirst. Don't need to satisfy my yearning. I'm already one with God. I just want to be with God. That's all. I love just because. That's the ultimate level of love. Now, that love, he will come to say, can only truly come from the mind. Once we recognize that God is not only an integral part of our lives, but that we are an integral part of him, and we are one. Once we can contemplate on this notion, then that idea of oneness will become very clear to us. And then that love can maybe be achieved, maybe. But that's really the general direction that the Tanya is taking us to. So let's continue. Unless, of course, any other questions, comments, feel free. I encourage that a lot. Okay, let's then continue. Margot?
Sure.
Where you said, so middle of page 239, right? This is the element of water and seed?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Okay. This
So,
is the element of water and seed, that is a sowing of light in the holiness of the godly soul, which transforms to good the element of water in the animal soul, from which the lust for mundane pleasures had been previously derived.
right. Continue, because Rabbi Stans will explain that
Okay.
phrase.
When
Yes.
a person attains the level of love and delights, he no longer needs to force himself to abandon worldly matters and desires, for he no longer desires them. This is the transition from the stage of subduing to that of transforming, from the stage where he has to suppress the animal soul, itkafia, to that where the animal soul itself derives holiness, itkapka.
Right.
Love and delights suffuses the soul so completely that it leaves no room for any other desires. As a result, the desires of the animal soul are converted into holy desires. This is the ultimate solution to all the problems of desire in all its forms and expressions. On this level, the person has achieved a resolution of the problem of desire at its root, a solution that eliminates the necessity for all other solutions at all other levels. In this state of being, the mere existence of God is a source of delight. From this vantage point, all other pleasures are sterile alternatives to the delight in their ultimate source.
Right. And that's what really pure love is about. I'm so infatuated by this love that nothing else matters to me. It reminds me of the Mishnah. It's an interesting Mishnah. And it's very much connected. And, I don't want to deviate, but it speaks really to the essence of this idea. But the Mishnah that asked the question of on what grounds can a person divorce his spouse? What grounds? So there are three different opinions. One opinion is that if something really terrible happened, like a cheating scandal. Another ground is that no, even if the spouse was cooking dinner and the cooking came out burnt and terrible, I can divorce my spouse because of that. The third opinion, which is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, who we know had an exemplary relationship with his wife. His opinion is that afilu matzato isha na'a hemena, that even if he found a more pretty, more pretty spouse than his wife. So if you're looking around, you find someone more pretty, then you can divorce your spouse. Why? What does that mean? But I think the essence of his opinion really reflects that which the Tanya says here. What Rabbi Akiva says is that really your marriage should be a marriage in which you are infatuated with love. And you are so in love that you're not even looking elsewhere. It doesn't even cross your mind, God forbid, to marry someone else. And that's the ultimate marriage. If you've left that mode, then really you have grounds for divorce, because your marriage now is, even if it's just in the initial thought stage, your marriage now is tarnished. And in a way, this is what love and delights really means. That I'm so infatuated by God, I'm so in love that nothing else matters to me. Not a good ice cream, and not even a baseball score of last night or a basketball score of last night. We're not in baseball season right now. Nothing. All I care about is God. I care about God. I think about God. I'm madly in love with God, and I want to do what God wants me to do at all times. Okay, not because
I think you left one thing out.
Yes, please.
If a woman cannot conceive, in Orthodox circles, that's accepted as a reason for divorce. Am I not right?
After 10 years, there's an opinion, but many do not follow it. I'll tell you who did not follow it. The Lubavitcher Rebbe did not follow it. He didn't have any children, but he stayed married with his wife for many decades. So you're right. There are other opinions offered. I was talking about the core of that conversation, which comes from the Mishnah, right? Yeah. But again, the idea is that and by the way, that answers why it's only an opinion. Because if I'm so madly in love with my wife, I can't fathom living without her for even a second. And therefore, whether she's barren or not, it doesn't matter. And that's the point. It's that type of love that we must have with God. Now, can we achieve it all the time? I don't know. Can we achieve it most of the time? I also don't know. But we can make a point that we have an hour a day to try and achieve that love. Maybe that's what prayer is all about. Which I divorce myself from this world or from the physical desires that I have. And I say to myself, okay, I'm going to immerse myself in this love in which only God counts. Now, does it have to be during prayer? I'd rather it be during a conversation that nothing else counts. Nothing. There is a great line in the Talmud that says that Adam ki yamut ba'ohel. It quotes a verse from the portion of Chukat in which we speak about just the technical law of a man dying in a tent. That man dying in a tent makes the entire tent, anyone who's under that tent, impure, right? That's the technical law that the Torah speaks about in the book of Numbers, in Bamidbar. But what the Talmud does is that it puts a nice spin on this verse. And what it says is, Adam ki yamut ba'ohel. Why does it use the word tent? And the Talmud says that it might be referring also to Ohala shel Torah, to the tent of Torah. That when one is in the tent of Torah, and when one is studying Torah, then one has to die. Memit et atzmo ba'ohala shel Torah. Those are the words of the Talmud. What does it mean to die? That means that every other desire of yours dies. You're so immersed in the study of Torah and connecting to God's mind, what the Torah is, that everything else is dead. You know the good story of this man who came to a town that didn't like to welcome guests, a town that hated guests, but he was a guest, and he came to that town, and on Friday night he goes to shul, and no one wants to invite him. Eventually someone has pity on him, so he says, you know what, come to my house. And he goes to his house, and as soon as the host brings him into the house, he runs to his wife. He says, look, unfortunately, I invited a guest. It's a terrible sin. We hate guests. So, but I had pity on him. He was left in shul by himself. So let's do this, he tells his wife. We invited him to our house. It doesn't mean we have to feed him. So when you come and serve the food, I'm going to start asking questions, and he's going to have to answer my questions. And while he answers the question, I'll eat quickly, you'll eat quickly, and then we'll go to the next course. He won't have time to eat. Next course, come ask him another question. He'll have to answer the question. Fine. All right, so the host and his wife start the meal. She serves the meal, and then the host says to the guest, so how's Reuven doing in your town? The man says, Reuven is dead. He understood what was happening. The guest quickly eats. After he says that Reuven is dead, he says, oh, 1 second. The host says, well, how's Shimon doing in your town? He says, Shimon is dead. He eats quickly. He says, how's Levi? How's Levi doing? Levi is dead, and he eats quickly because he understood exactly what was happening. So the host finally says, I don't understand. Everyone is dead from the town you come from? He says to him, well, when I eat, everyone is dead. But that's the idea, that that when I study Torah, everything else is dead. And when I'm one with God, again, prayer, Torah, mitzvah, encountering the divine in someone else, and everything else is dead. Everything else is dead. And that comes from that pure love, that loving delight, that I'm so infatuated with that love that really nothing else exists. Now I know that it's a very hard exercise in our day and age, where really we live in, as many have called it, the age of distraction. You know, we are distracted by, I don't know, I think there was a statistic about that. Even when you are writing emails and you want to be one with that email, you have Google ads popping up on your screen tailored to you. How can you not be distracted? They tailor to you. Or you have, you know, your phone ringing 20,000 times a day. Whatever it is, we live in an age of distraction. To achieve that love is very, very hard. But it comes first and foremost with this approach of everything else is dead. Yes, everyone in my town is dead when I eat. Everyone else is dead when I pray, or when I pick that mitzvah. So we can't achieve it 100% of the time, but we can try and achieve it at least 10% of the time, and eventually grow that percentage from 10% to 20% to 30% and so on. But that's really the idea. And we can continue, but again, I'd love to hear your comments and ideas and disagreements and questions. And
well, there is a risk in loving someone to the point of being blind, because it becomes like worshiping an idol in a way, because that's an imperfect human being, and you love this person so much that you're blind to all the defects of that person.
right,
The person may end up hurting you,
right,
and you don't know that.
right. Very, very good point. That's right. It's true in the relationships with human beings, not with God, obviously, but it's very true. But I will dare say that we can only know if the person really fits me, especially in the case of marriage, is if I become vulnerable, if I indeed give my all. If I have these reservations all the time, I'll never fully know the other person because I'm blocked by my reservations. It's only when I remove my own walls and really devote myself to the other and try and really become one with the other, that I'll know who the other truly is. And then I'll know at that point if indeed I should die in that relationship, right? When I'm in that relationship, everything else is dead, or not. That's so in a way, the paradox of life, that I have to, as they say, I have to, not really, it's not the same expression, to lose myself to find myself, but it's even more than that. I have to devote myself to find the other. If I'm walking around with masks, I'll never find the other because I have a mask on. So, and by the way, Elizabeth, I think that's a very good point, because that's exactly what the Tanya is saying. That's where then the mind comes in, right? The mind is there all the time in the driver's seat, ready to guide us. While I might be madly in love, and I have indeed removed every obstacle from myself. I'm as vulnerable as it gets. But then the mind can come and continue to drive that car and tell you, well, 1 second, there's a red flag here and there's a red flag there. So you always have to have the mind in control from that standpoint. Yeah.